Well, thank you so much for joining us on Mom with a Microphone. Today we have a very special guest. This is my sister. This is Leandra Greene. I'm going to let her introduce herself in just a minute. But before we start, we're going to be talking about a very, I think, relevant topic, something that is so right now that a lot of women are dealing with, struggling with maybe, and maybe have just recently overcome. But it's talking about the grace to juggle momhood, wifehood, and ministry success. And so I want to give you a second. Thank you so much for being here. I want to give you a second to introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Thank you, Ashley, for having me. And yes, you are my sister. I love you dearly. So I am Leandra Greene. I'm the wife of Ray Greene. I always say that.
Okay, Ray.
Ray. And I'm a mother of three, 24, 20, and 16.
Pause. You would never know. You would literally never know. Okay.
And I am the GD to the amazing Ava Greene that I love so dearly. She's 2. I am a business owner of Purpose Publishing House. I'm heavily involved in ministry, women empowerment. My husband and I are marriage coaches. We do a Truth About Marriage conversation once a month. And I just love people. I'm an outgoing person. Yeah, that's pretty much who I am.
Okay. So clearly all the things. Can we start? I'm just going to let you talk, but I just want to start with can you just kind of tell us, you gave us some of the ministries that you do. Can you go back over that again?
Okay.
So that we can kind of segue into how you're actually juggling all these things. Because I remember one of the first conversations we had, true conversations, and I was like, you just told me 8 different things that you do, and I don't understand how you get all of that done because, yeah. So
being a wife is priority number 1 to me for everything. I'm a wife, and for me, my family supersedes everything I do because I feel like if the home is on lock, everything else will fall into place.
Yeah.
And so we are celebrating 23 years, I think, this year. You start getting lost.
Right.
So I think it's 23 years this year. And just maneuvering life with him has been a journey. And it also has been very beneficial because he helps me to be more of a balanced individual.
Yeah.
I'm real high. He's super kosher.
Chill, yeah.
And so for me, that helps me to build things in. And then being a mom, of course, is different too because initially we had little children, such as you and Jimmy, we were this family that will just do everything together. And so now we're in a different phase of life where our children are adults.
Yeah.
We have one, of course, that'll be 17 in a few months, but he'll be a senior in high school in the fall. So we're almost empty nesters.
Yep.
And even with that being said, the phase of parenting is so different because we can't put our kids on punishment. We literally have to just give them the space to evolve into what
and figure things out.
Into what they're supposed to be, and the principles, pray that the principles that we taught them become something that they grab a hold of. And then ministry for me is so important because I'm a PK's kid. Initially, I
explain just in case people don't know what PK is.
Pastor's kid.
Okay.
Of actually almost 31 years on February 1st.
Wow.
And so within the next few months, I'll be actually moving into pastoralship. As my dad is transitioning to retire. So that alone is a different phase of life because now it's another level of commitment, another level of dedication, another level of just dying to me and what I like to do, what I want to do. And so it's a shift literally taking place in 2024 in my life. And then I'm very passionate, as I said, about women ministry.
Yeah.
I do a lot of women empowerment events, anything that will help empower women, wives, just as a whole. And then, of course, the ministerial piece when it comes to marriages. My husband and I do marriage coaching. We coach several marriages behind the scenes. We sit down and have conversations, just do things that will really help to enhance marriages and just really give them our transparent journey and help, hopefully, that it brings some type of healing and reconciliation and just hope to marriage altogether. So
what would you say to women who are trying to figure all that out?
That there's no blueprint to this journey. Literally, every day I ask God to lead me and guide me. Every day I'm asking God for wisdom to make sure that I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing right now versus overloading myself with things that are just great ideas and great concepts and really have no true relevance to my life.
Yeah.
One of the worst things that you could ever do is work so diligent in an area that you were never called to operate in. And then you get to heaven and God says, well, you did great, but that was not what I called you to do.
Ooh. Okay.
You know, and that's hard, you know, so you want to make sure that you're in the vein of God. So that way, whatever you do it edifies who you are in the earth in regards to what you've been called to do. So that's something that I've been very intentional about focusing on, because I don't want to be a jack of all trades.
Right.
You know, because you just lose yourself in the process. And so, even when it came to book publishing, it wasn't a task that I wanted to do. It was something that God called me to do. And I was literally bothered with the Father when he said, I want you to do this. I'm like, what do you mean you want me to publish books? I wrote a book. I want to give them the blueprint to write it, but I don't want to walk the journey. Ooh. And he said, I want you to walk the journey with authors. And so initially I kicked and fought and screamed, but it has been such a blessing to my life and blessing to those that I've been able to work with across the U.S. globe. People from city to city, state to state. I've been just able to connect the dots and help other people fulfill purpose in writing books. So I would just tell people that have the mantle of ministry, motherhood, wife, business, entrepreneurship, all that great stuff. I would say, listen, just, you know, ask God for guidance. You know, don't overwhelm yourself trying to master every single thing. It's a process for us. So yeah, it's something we had to learn.
I want to go back to something you said. You said a lot of times you have like these really good ideas or things that you'd be interested in. Do you ever write those down, make note of them? Like, do you think that sometimes maybe it's just the idea, the seed is being planted, but it's just not the right time or the right season?
Absolutely. There are things that God gives me as visions, but I understand time is everything. Just because we have a vision to do something doesn't necessarily mean that it's the time to do it. So like you said, I write it down. I'll jot it down and have a conversation with my husband and bounce it off his brain and say, hey, you know, what about this? Or do you know, what are your thoughts on this particular thing to do? And then timing, is it the right time? If all the finances that are needed to do it, you know, is everything there? So that's important. So
when did you, I guess, step into ministry on your own?
I have to laugh. I literally have to laugh. So, where do I start? Well, I'll say this just to give you a short story. I knew I was called to ministry when I was 5.
Ooh.
I didn't know what ministry was, but I knew that the hand of God was upon my life. And I remember specifically having a dream. It was either a dream or a vision. I can't remember. I remember seeing myself on a podium. I never could physically see me in adulthood or even as a child, but I knew it was me because I could look through the eyes of the person. And I saw people so far out that I couldn't even number them. And I saw myself speaking. And I remember waking up. I had to have a dream. I remember waking up and telling my mom, I think I wrote it in my first book. I said, Ma, I dreamed that I saw myself speaking to people, and it was so many people, I couldn't see where they ended. It was outside. It was just like thousands and thousands of people. And my mom said, you know, you have a call in your life. You're going to do the work of the Lord. I didn't know what that meant.
Right.
You know, but I knew what God used to deal with me as a little girl with dreams. And, you know, people would prophesy to me when I was 5 and 7. Like, they would just randomly be like, who is this little girl? Like, who is her parents? It was so weird. Like, strangers. And they would say, your daughter will be a blessing to so many people. The hand of God is upon her life. And I remember one guy came and preached at our church years ago, and he said to my dad, he didn't even know that was my dad. He didn't know that I was his daughter. He just was like, who is this young lady? I may have been like 15 or 16. I may have been 16 because I just met my husband. And he said, I don't know who her parents are, but they need to know that God's going to use her in a great way. And when she begins to align herself with the will of the Lord, finances will never be an issue for her. I will never forget that. I just met my husband. We were like literally, we weren't even boyfriend and girlfriend yet, but he heard that word. And to this day, he remembered that word. And it literally manifested. I was a level of disobedience for many years. And then when I did line myself up, the blessings of God literally began to flow. So yeah.
That's crazy.
And my dad was like, that's my daughter.
That's crazy. Yeah. So what did that feel like? Even from 5 until you actually started actively pursuing ministry? What took place in your life in between?
If I could just be very honest with you, Ashley, I almost felt like I was cursed. Does that make sense?
What do you mean?
Because I was so different, so unique that I never would blend. So even my sisters, and I don't want to go super deep in this podcast, but I have to kind of give you a snippet. But because of the anointing that was up on my life as a young girl, I faced much warfare as a young girl. I would literally see demons manifest in front of me as I was sleeping in beds. Many times they would literally, in the form, it would look like a human, but I would know that they weren't human. I can go from so many stories, but I remember being so fearful to sleep at night that I would sleep on my sister's floors for many years. I would sleep with a night light. I would have to have the bathroom. My dad would be so frustrated, my mom, because she said, leave the light on, because they would literally tap me on my shoulder and wake me up and say, hey, wake up, wake up. And sometimes they would come in the form of people that I knew. And sometimes they would be just random weird looking creatures. And so I felt cursed, because how can you say you're going to use me for great things and I'm being tormented by the supernatural? And it was because, honestly, I didn't know who I was. I didn't know how much power I possessed through the blood of Jesus. And so I was fearful. But then once I became into the knowledge of knowing who I was and how to operate in the anointing of my life, fear was removed. And then I began to operate in faith and began to bind the enemy. And so those particular incidents are no longer something that I have to deal with, because I have power. Now I know I have power over the enemy. So when I say I felt cursed, it was because of that, because I felt like it was just like I was so weird.
Yeah.
I was so weird, and it just did not make sense. And so that, for me, I would ask God many times, why didn't you choose my sisters? Why did you choose me for this? This doesn't feel like a call. This doesn't feel like ministry. But over time, the Father began to really minister to me, and I began to understand what the call entailed.
How many siblings do you have?
2 sisters.
2 sisters. And do you feel like they understood or they knew? So you're sleeping on their floors. Like what were you saying to them in these moments?
They would actually be afraid of me. They would say, I want you out of my room because you make things appear. You make things happen.
So they were able to experience some of what you were...
They never really saw it, but they can sense it. And then on top of them being able to sense it, there were moments where I would just scream or just have like a real crazy, weird moment. And so that made them afraid of me.
Yeah.
Because like, I don't want you in my room, because whatever's following you is going to follow me. So I want you out of my room. And so that was I just felt like the black sheep, the eyeball, because nobody understood what I was going through as a young girl. My mom did, but everybody else was like, she's just straight weird, like weirdo. So our relationship, of course, we're all a year apart, but that piece of the puzzle was very challenging as a kid, because they were regular and I wasn't.
Right. So at regular.
And that's what I felt like a little girl.
Yeah.
I'm like, they're regular. I'm not regular. Like, why am I not regular?
So at this point, your dad is a pastor. Mm-hmm. What did your parents have to say about, I mean, did you tell them, like, were they aware, like, this is what's going on?
Yeah. Yeah. My dad became a pastor when I was roughly about 12 years old. So I started experiencing this when I was 5. So prior to him, he was a preacher at the time. But I think my dad was like, she's weird too. And my mom was like, she's not weird. So it was like a real weird situation at home. One incident in particular, I remember washing dishes. I was probably about 15 years old, maybe 16. I could have been a little bit older, 16, 17. And at the time, my dad was pastoring. But I was a very disobedient, rebellious child. So to say God said something was like, how could God speak to you and you just blatantly disrespect every rule in his house? But this particular night, I remember washing dishes. And I remember hearing tick, tock. And I was like, what in the world is that? So when I walked out the kitchen into the living room, I began to see this death angel sitting on my parents' couch. Had red eyes and stared at me and was patiently waiting. And it felt like the closer I got to it, I heard the tick-tock become louder and louder. So once I passed it up, I ran up the stairs to my mom and dad's bedroom, and I said, listen, there's a death angel. I don't know how I knew this, but But I heard the Lord say, there's a death angel downstairs on the couch. And the objective really is for somebody to die tonight. And my dad was like, well, how did God speak to you? And you are so disobedient and so rebellious. My mom was like, listen, we got to listen to her because she heard something and she saw what she saw. And so at that point, we all got into a circle. We got around my parents' bed and we prayed on our knees. As we began to pray, I began to see angels. It's like God took me out of my body as I was in my parents' bedroom. And I was over the house and I began to see angels linked up arm to arm around our home, guarding our home from whatever the enemy had plans to do. And I remember just weeping and crying and saying to my parents, there are angels around our house and their arms are linking together. Years later, I was probably married. I had to be married. And I read this book. He came to set the captive free. It's a very, very serious, deep warfare book about just warfare, someone that needed deliverance. But in the book, she talked about when she was being delivered, how there were linking angels linked up arm to arm around the house that she was staying in when the enemy was coming, basically trying to destroy her life. It was like an eye-opening experience because to me, it confirmed what I saw as a young girl. And it didn't make sense to my parents, but I knew what I saw.
Yeah.
And I remember reading the book and I said, remember I told my parents, remember what I told you guys that I saw? This is what I saw. So I knew it was real.
That's crazy.
That's
and
crazy.
they remembered.
They remembered.
So what was their reaction?
Like, whoa. Everybody, matter of fact, everybody in the church was reading the book. He came to set the captive free. So we all just like discussed it. And I was like, you cannot tell me God does not use me.
Right.
He does not speak to me.
Right.
You know, I don't know her from a can of paint, but I know what I saw. Yeah.
So how do these experiences shape how you do ministry now?
Absolutely. It really does because I'm more open. You know, a lot of people are more religious, like just regimented. Oh, God is, this is God. And, it really comes with knowledge and it really comes with just really asking him to open your eyes to understand because, that's why the word of God tells us my people perish for lack of knowledge because we're limited in how much we know based upon what we're exposed to. But when you begin to ask God to really show you, he'll begin to reveal the hidden things. He even tells us in his word, he'll reveal the hidden things to us, but we have to be open to it. So now how I operate in ministry is, I'm not a traditional preacher, meaning that if God speaks to me in the moment and says, say this, or if he says shift and move in this direction, I'm more open because I know that it's something he has to do in the moment. Yeah. So, yeah.
So your ministries now, is your husband involved? You
Absolutely.
said you have a ministry specifically with him, but what does that look like?
So currently, he just pretty much assists whatever I'm doing in ministry. He's there to support me 100%. Whether he always says to me, we laugh about this. He's like, if I'm the armor bearer to my wife, so be it. I'm here to serve you in whatever capacity, you are called into. And he say all the time, I knew you were going to be used by God when we were kids. And so that never intimidated who I am and my destiny because of, I knew that eventually God was going to use you. And so that's not we don't have necessarily like roles in regards to our marriage. He just knows that ministry is heavily over my life. And so he respects that. So that's that from that perspective, that's how we operate in ministry. He's like, let's just go.
And it's always been that way?
Always. There's never been any resistance. I'm so grateful. There's never been any resistance in regards to the ministry that God has called for me to do. Ever. He's always just been 100% like, I believe in you.
Oh.
And that makes me, that brings, cohesion in the marriage as well.
Mm-hmm. So what does your ministry together look like?
Ministry together is evolving. Especially now since I'm being thrusted into this position.
Right.
So we work, matter of fact, yesterday, we did our first kickoff of our consecration prayer church. He was like literally there side by side with me. Everything I needed, he was like, bam, got it, fix it, set it up. He was just there, and just being visible and supporting me is so important. So that's pretty much how we flow in ministry. When I have to preach, my husband's the one packs all my bags, anything I'm selling, anything. He's there helping me at my tables. He's just always by my side. And I'm appreciative that I have a secure husband that's not intimidated by my destiny. It makes me feel confident in the God than the God in me, because
Right.
now it's like, I know that this is what I've been called to do. And I know I'm with the right person, because
Yeah.
typically if you're not with the right person, it could be a conflict in your home,
Yep.
you know? And so for me, that just reassures me that I'm right where God wants me to be and with the person God desires me to be with.
Yeah. So when you, I know that your schedule's crazy and you're, every time I even talk to you, like, oh, I'm on my way to do this or I'm doing this, which is great. Like you're very organized. You have it all like laid out. How does that impact your marriage? Like, how do you all make time for each other? Or this is more into the question of juggling all of these things.
Yeah.
Now. Like what does that look like?
Honestly, Ashley, where do I start? I don't know how to say it. We just do it. Does that make sense? We just do it. When he's home from work, I'm so in his face, like I'm like a puppy. Like, I want to be up under you. I want to be around you. What are we doing? Even if it's conversation, for me, that is important. Everything else, I do have conference calls periodically in the evening, but for the most part, I try to make sure that I balance home out, where when he's home, I'm like Team Ray. Like, what are we doing? What are we talking? I don't care if we're just talking. We can just go to $5 Tuesday movie. We do $5
Right.
movies on Tuesdays. We go to the movie theater and go see a movie sometimes. I'm in school as well. I forgot to mention that, seminary school. But even with that being said, we plan out our schedule and we just work together. We do vacations, which I think is so important.
Yeah.
Because we get a chance to remove all of the other things out the way and just focus completely upon one another. So yeah. So
I want to take it back to like the motherhood side. So your kids are roughly 4
Everybody's
years
4 years
apart.
apart.
Okay. So 4 years apart. When they were little, because you've been doing ministry for a while now, and you started your businesses and your publishing house and all that stuff. What did that look like? How did you keep that balance?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I didn't start my publishing company until my daughter was like probably a sophomore in high school. And by that time, our oldest was out of high school. And then Christian was still, I think, in the 5th grade. It was weird. But even with that being said, I pretty much scheduled everything during the day. My daughter used to be super involved in sports. And so she was in track meets every week, track practice 4 to 5 days a week. So I was very intentional. I was youth assistant pastor for many years. And so I was very intentional about making sure that I didn't miss track meets on Sundays, because her meets were on Sundays. So when it was summertime, I was like, I won't be present.
Yeah.
If it was my son, my oldest son, he used to do a lot of singing, choir concerts and things of that sort. I was very intentional making sure I was present, because I understood, especially growing up as a PK kid, my dad had to give up a lot.
Yeah.
Because he had to be present for the church. And so I said for myself, I was like, I have to make sure that my kids understand that they are a priority.
Yeah.
And everything else is second. And so I just made those sacrifices. Now, the last kid is not really involved in sports. So that juggling that piece is not
A little bit easier.
as difficult. Yeah, it's a lot easier with the family dynamic now. And so my husband worked nights for many years. So it was like literally me just like, got to get them here. I was working a full-time job at the time. I was, getting to track practice, packing bags, leave her track practice, get home, got to get the kids ready for studying tests.
Yep.
We would be at track meets like having, paper to study to prepare for the test for my oldest son when he was younger. He was still in school. And so it was a challenge. But for me, that was number one.
So I would say, like, for me personally, one of the things I really struggle with is not necessarily prioritizing, but figuring out, like, what can wait. You know what I mean? So there will be times where I'm doing something and I'm like, ugh, but I need to be spending time with my kids, but I need to get this done. And
Yeah.
Like, what advice do you have for the mom who's trying to figure out? Not really like checking. Make sure that they're prioritizing and they're balancing well.
I would say put yourself in your child's position. Find, think about the fact, can you find yourself being resentful if you were the child because your mother was overly involved with this and you felt like you were second or third? And that for me was probably my driving point. That's what kept me going. I didn't want my kids to get to a point where they became teenagers one day and was so angry because I was so heavily involved with this and that,
Preoccupied.
and not really giving them the attention that was needed. And that doesn't mean I was a perfect mom, but that was one of the most important pieces to being a parent for me.
Yeah.
And then also my being a wife, I made sure that I said something. We had date night. We made sure that we did, even if we didn't have the money, Ashley, girl, we would fix some chicken and put a tablecloth on the living room table, light some candles, turn some music on, and it was on. So I made sure that I was intentional about being with my kids and then taking those time out to be with my husband. So it's a process, but just kind of making sure that the home front is on lock. Everything else can wait. Yeah.
So I want to take it back. You're a PK. And do you feel like that was the reason why you did the rebelling and the acting out and all that stuff? You think that specifically is why? Why is that?
Because being a PK, you have to it's a lot of sacrifices that are there. You got to be willing to share your parents. And growing up as a kid, I dealt with a lot of trauma from molestation and rape. And so those left voids in my life. And so I was looking for love in other places when my parents are busy building. And so for me, I was kind of a rebel, like, hey, what about me? And so I do this to get attention here. But it wasn't the right way to handle, the situation.
Yeah.
But going through that as a teenager, it really helps me to be able to interact better with my children and figure out what can I do to help and be more present, even with ministry and being a wife and a mother, just balancing all of it out.
So your kids, you've got 3. Do you feel like, technically they're PKs also?
Oh my God.
So
that's so hard to even process.
Yeah. So, but they are.
They
when you
are.
want to talk
That's so
technical,
crazy.
they are.
They are.
So do you see some of that same behavior from them?
Ooh,
or
Lord Jesus.
They're older,
Yes and no. Probably more so my younger one than any of them. He reminds me so much of myself that it is annoying. Like literally, he is like his mother's child. And then the older 2 are more like, they have more of my husband's demeanor. They're more just calm. My daughter's really reserved. My oldest son, he's even more reserved. Oh my God. So they carry their dad's personality in regards to just their temperament. So yeah, in regards to, do I see that with my kids? I think I do. But I think even being a pastor, you don't know, you're figuring it out as you go. So my parents are trying to figure this thing out, like, how do I juggle church and juggle being a parent of 3 girls? It was hard, And then my dad really grew up without a father. So he was trying his best to be the father that he probably thought he never had. Right. My mom too. So long story short, it's just a process being a PK's kid. It's in a pastor altogether. So it's a difficult place, but I'm like, okay, God, you called me to do this. You called us. This is our family assignment. I pray for the family as a whole unit versus saying this is a ministry that you gave me, because ultimately it affects my entire family. Yeah. So I'm like, I need you to give me the grace for every aspect with my entire family.
Yeah. Okay, so my next question deals more specifically with just you as an entrepreneur, as a businesswoman, as a, I guess ministry is still part of that. But like, how did you decide like, hey, this is what I'm going to be doing? Because I feel like sometimes as a woman, we have a call, and a lot of times it gets, I guess, not watered down, but kind of diminished because other things take priority so much and so often.
Well, just being honest with you, I didn't necessarily have a mindset to, I don't want to say I didn't want to be an entrepreneur. I thought my life would just be totally ministry driven. That's all I saw that's all I ever heard.
Yeah.
And so when I wrote my first book, just getting the resources available to help me write was so challenging. And so after I did the book, God just really put it on my heart to start doing book writing courses every January, which I'm getting ready to do this Saturday. And I did that, and I would literally just give them the pieces of the puzzle and then send them to different publishing companies, to do the work, or, a graphic design artist. And I remember maybe 2 years in, Holy Spirit said to me, as I was preparing for the following January, it was like October, November, He said, do not do another book writing course until you release your publishing company. And I'm like, in my kitchen, I'm like, what?
What publishing
What are
company?
you talking about? I think we just moved in our new house. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I don't even know. I don't want to do this. I'm like, I'm preaching. I'm loving God. I'm busy doing ministry. I don't have time to do a publishing company. That means I have to be on the phone with people. And that's a process. And I kind of was angry with God for probably a week or so. And I didn't want to disobey him. And so I said, okay, God, if you want me to do it, I don't even have a name for this company. And I remember him showing me a globe. And he said, Purpose Publishing House. It is basically, this is a facility where purpose is fulfilled. Like our motto is, this is how you reach purpose, by writing. And I was like, okay, God. And so I saw the globes and I just wrote Purpose Publishing House. And I got us a graphic design artist. She created the logo and I released the company. And from there, never thought that I would be blessed to work with some amazing people from all different walks of background, single mothers, married women, doctors, lawyers, pastors, professors, you name it. I've just been blessed to work with some amazing people, with some amazing books, like literally amazing projects. Like, wow, God, you graced us. We actually have a project now that is in one of the Missouri prisons in Bon Tier. That one of my clients wrote a book, and the book is now a book that they use to teach the inmates. And I'm like, wow,
that's
Purpose
crazy.
Publishing House logo is on the back of this book.
Yeah.
Like, that's major.
That is.
Had I not been in position, had I not obeyed the voice of the Lord, I would not have been that outlet that God would have used for that particular assignment. And so I'm a firm believer that being in position, being where God called you to be in the time that he called you to be in that specific place, allows doors to open for you.
Yeah.
And sometimes people get frustrated because they're like, I don't want to do this. This is too big, or it becomes intimidating, or fear. But when God releases you into something, he always graces you for the assignment. And so from there, seeing God unfold blessings in my life, and then people be blessed by the yes, is like, whoa. It's like,
Blessed
wow.
by the yes. I like that. Blessed by the yes.
Yeah.
Probably gonna make that a shirt.
Okay. I love it.
So how important was it for you to write down the things that you felt like God was telling you to do? In other words, like vision boarding or writing your goals, like, was that an important part of it, or was it just kind of, so tell me about your process of how, like, even now, how you go about doing that.
So I don't physically write like I used to. I more so use my notes in my phone. I'm a huge note taker. Like, when I feel something, hear something, I'm always putting it down. Even messages to preach. I probably have so many messages to preach already typed up, either in my notes or I put it together in my computer or my email drive. I just believe that you always have to have an ear to hear, because you don't know what God may speak to you. And it may not necessarily be for right now, but it could be something for your future.
Yeah.
And so just being available to have an ear to hear the voice of the Lord is so critical for your life. It helps to form your life. The word of the Lord, the Bible says it's a lamp unto our feet. It's a light unto our pathway. It's his word. Even though it's not Genesis to Revelation, it's still the word that he gives to us to live by.
Yeah.
So I'm a firm believer. I have so many notes. It's crazy.
What's your take on failure?
Start all over, do it again. You mess up. My dad always told me, even with just getting no's, he said if they say no, you can always start all over. You can go back and do it again. That stuck with me as a young girl. And so I feel like if you fail, get back up again and do it all over. You know what I mean? How many times people that are millionaires did not have a successful business, went through foreclosure, went through bankruptcy so many times. And I hate to say this like this. Is it okay to say Donald Trump? Some people love Donald, but Donald, he's had so many bankruptcies and business failures. And, you know, he may not necessarily be the most polite person in general, but he's successful. He started all over again every single time. You know, his life is a testament that even if you failed, you can do it all over again.
Yeah. Do you mind sharing one of the times where you felt like, because we're talking about juggling and, you know, being successful and balancing all of these different areas of life. Can you tell us about a time where maybe you didn't feel successful and what that looked like and how you overcame?
I'm sure there are some times off the top of my head, can I think of any?
No, that's okay.
Well, let me say this. So I actually did. I actually did Mary Kay for many years, and I wanted to be the successful Mary Kay consultant. Like I wanted the pink Cadillac, and, all of that. And honestly, I felt like my head was just hitting the ceiling. I would work so hard in that particular field, and I just felt like, why is it that I can't be the successful Mary Kay consultant that I'm seeing other ladies around me become? And what I learned from that experience was, it was really just teaching me endurance. It was teaching me patience. It was teaching me hard work, even though I didn't see necessarily the fruit of my labor. It was teaching me to continue to move forward. And after I finally walked away from Mary Kay and God started venturing me into writing my first book, sent me that direction. I didn't know that even that part of the journey helped me throughout my writing process of my own first book. It just kept pushing me, like, keep going. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. And so now I'm an author of 4 books, and I've helped release so many books with other people, I learned something from it. I didn't necessarily ever become this big Mary Kay consultant, and no, I did not get the pink Cadillac.
That's okay.
But I feel like I'm successful within my own right.
Yeah,
today.
for sure.
Absolutely.
For sure. So thank you so much for joining us today. Is there any last pieces of advice or wisdom or inspiration that you want to leave with listeners?
Well, thank you for having me. I would honestly just say, keep going. The sky's the limit. You are your own enemy. It's not your neighbor. It's not someone on your job. You are the one that can cause you to fail, because you got to be your greatest cheerleader. You have to be your greatest motivator, and you have to push yourself even when you don't feel like doing it. You have to keep going. And so that would be my word, and keep God first. Ask God, what is it that you would have me to do? What direction would you have me to go in, so that I can be a blessing, not to my life, but when you start thinking about other people, that's when God uses you the most. So that would be my word of encouragement.
So for people who are interested, where can they connect with you, find you? What platforms? Where can they find you?
Facebook, you can follow me under Leandra Greene. Our website for my husband and I marriage coaching is thetruthaboutmarriage.net. And if they want to publish a book, my website is purposepublishinghouse.com. So I'm on that pretty much every platform: Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. I'm not a huge TikToker, but I do like TikTok. I more so like to watch it.
Right.
Post. But yeah, they can find me under Leandra Greene for the most part on all of my platforms. And so, yeah.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today. Again, if you want to connect with Leandra, she's given you all the platforms where you can follow her, find her, like, subscribe, listen, ask questions, whatever. I hope that you were able to get something today that can be beneficial and useful to your life and your ministry. And thank you again for joining Mom with a Microphone.